In Lochdubh, even a bird call can become evidence when it comes from the wrong field. The village had agreed to host a rare bird weekend because Rona Dempster said it would bring visitors, grant money and respect. By Saturday morning, it had brought 40 folding chairs, 2 coaches, a crooked banner and several people who described rain as authentic. Hamish Macbeth expected arguments about parking and sheep. He was less certain about the curlew supposedly calling from the disputed grazing field above the loch. Nobody had photographed it, and the people most certain it was there seemed to need it rather badly. Before the weekend was over, Hamish would learn that a good cause could gather vanity, grief, and fear around itself until nobody remembered where the truth had been left. Chapter 1. Field glasses and folding chairs. The first folding chair sank into the field before the rare bird weekend had officially opened. Mrs. Todd, a bird watcher from Perth, remained seated while 2 volunteers pulled her free. Her expression suggested Lochdubh would be hearing from her solicitor. "I was told the ground had been prepared. It was inspected yesterday," said Rona Dempster. Rona, secretary of the local conservation trust, held a clipboard against her spotless green coat. She had organised the weekend with the intensity of a woman defending civilization from poor signage. Hamish Macbeth stood beside the bird club table, drinking tea. "You inspected the road," Rona told him. "Ah, yeah. The seating area was included in the safety plan." "Was it? You were sent a copy." "It was under a letter from Blair telling me not to embarrass the police." Beyond them, mist covered the far side of the loch. The new bird hide stood above the reeds, and a banner hung between 2 fence posts. "Discover Lochdubh's wild treasures." One corner had slipped, leaving the treasures tilted toward the mud. Visitors descended from a coach in bright waterproofs and clean walking boots. Several photographed the mist. One woman called the landscape untouched, just as Angus McCrae drove his quad bike through the neighbouring gate. The woman frowned at the noise. Angus frowned at her. Neither seemed willing to accept the other as part of nature. Mrs. Patel had placed a tea urn beneath a striped canopy. Her sign offered tea, soup, oatcakes, and reasonable opinions. Rona had asked her to remove the final item. Mrs. Patel had added, "Unreasonable opinions cost extra." Lugs wandered over from the police station and sat on a laminated map of the walking route. "He cannot be here," said Rona. "He lives here," said Hamish. "This is a wildlife event. He's showing an interest. He is sitting on the Reedbed, on the map of it." Before Rona could reply, a warm, practised laugh sounded behind them. Dr. Jasper Lorne had arrived. The television naturalist was tall, silver-haired, and carefully weatherproofed. His programmes usually showed him standing in damaged landscapes while speaking sadly about the failures of other people. Rona hurried forward. "Dr. Lorne, welcome to Lochdubh." "Yes. The banner has already made me feel discovered." She laughed too quickly. Jasper turned to Hamish. "You must be the local constable." "Hamish Macbeth. Splendid name. It does the work." Angus came across the field, carrying a coil of wire. Jasper looked past him toward the grazing land. "So this is the proposed protection zone?" "It is not," said Angus. Rona's smile tightened. "The survey includes the upper field. The upper field is needed for lambing." Jasper offered Angus a hand. Angus ignored it. "Dr. Lorne has supported rural conservation projects across Britain," said Rona. "Aye," said Angus. "Usually from the other side of a camera." Jasper remained pleasant. "Good land management and conservation need not be enemies. Easy to say when the land belongs to somebody else." "The land does not belong to you," said Rona. "You lease the grazing." "My family worked it before you learned the word biodiversity." Eyelid Ross had been straightening the banner. She stopped and looked toward them. "The curlew was heard near the old boundary," she said. "3 evenings running." Eyelid was the quiet organiser of the weekend and keeper of the bird club records. Her late father had grazed the disputed field. She rarely spoke without thinking first, which made Hamish notice how quickly she had answered. Angus looked at her. "Your father never heard one there this late." "Birds move." "So do lines on grant maps." Rona stepped between them. "This weekend is meant to encourage cooperation." "It's meant to close my gate," said Angus. Jasper's interest sharpened. "You have a recording of the call? We'll play it during the guided walk," said Eilid. "Any photograph?" "No." "Independent sighting?" "Not yet." "Then we must remain cautious." Eilid's face changed slightly. "You came here to endorse the protection plan." "I came here to examine the evidence." The coach party had begun watching them with the pleasure of people who had paid for birds and received an argument. Rona guided Jasper toward the display table. "We have loan binoculars for the morning walk." Jasper picked up a pair labelled Club Pair 3 and raised them to his eyes. He lowered them at once. "One eye cup is turn." "They are old," said Eilid. "The lenses are good. The rubber appears determined to enter my face." He tried again, looking toward the reeds. The right eye cup was faded green and split along the rim. When he lowered the binoculars, a faint, crescent-shaped smudge marked his cheek. Hamish saw it before Jasper wiped it away with a white handkerchief. "Charming," Jasper said. "Do all the local facilities leave marks?" "Only if you press too hard," said Hamish. Jasper looked at him. Mrs. Patel rang a brass handbell. "Tea is ready. Coffee is also ready, but less successfully." The visitors moved toward the canopy. Angus returned to his gate. Rona followed Jasper. Eilid remained beside the table, examining the torn eye cup. Hamish picked up the handkerchief Jasper had dropped. A green crescent stained one corner. He returned it without comment. Jasper took it and smiled. "Observant." Sometimes. Behind them, the banner slipped again. The words, "Wild Treasures," leaned farther toward the ground, while beyond the fence Angus opened the gate for his sheep, and Eilid watched the disputed field as if something inside it belonged to the dead. Chapter 2. The bird nobody saw clearly. By 10:30, the rare bird weekend had divided itself into 3 groups. People hoping to see a curlew, people hoping to be seen caring about curlews, and locals wondering how long the visitors intended to block the road. Eilid counted the guided walkers twice. 41. "There were 43 registrations," said Rona. "One woman has gone back to the coach for dry socks," Hamish said. "The other is still at Mrs. Patel's stall." A large man in a waxed jacket stood beneath the canopy, holding an oatcake in each hand, while Jasper Lorne explained peatland restoration to him. Rona clapped for attention. "We'll follow the Reedbed path to the new hide. Please remain behind Eilid, keep conversation low, and do not enter the grazing field." She looked at Lugs. Lugs was investigating a patch of spilled soup beside the van. "He'll stay here," said Hamish. "He must. He has other plans." The walkers set off in a rustle of waterproof trousers and binocular straps. The path narrowed between the stone wall and the reed bed. Mist softened the loch, and beads of water hung from the reeds. Every few yards someone stopped to inspect a distant shape that became a sheep, a stone, or another bird-watcher. Jasper moved near the front, identifying common birds in a low, patient voice. His patience always sounded expensive. At a post marked with blue cloth, Eilid stopped. "This is where the call was first heard on Monday evening." The group raised binoculars together. Nothing appeared. A sheep scratched itself against a fence post. A visitor whispered. "Could it have been a wimbrel?" "No," said Eilid. The answer came too quickly. Jasper turned toward her. "You are certain?" "I know the call." "Your father taught you?" "He recorded birds here for 30 years. Angus's voice came from the other side of the wall. "And never recorded that one in this field." He was repairing wire with a pair of pliers. Rona sighed. "Must you do that now?" "The fence is broken now." "You are undermining the walk." "I'm keeping sheep where they belong. You should approve." A few visitors smiled. Eilid looked away from Angus and continued down the path. The new hide stood above the reeds, smelling of damp timber and fresh varnish. Only 12 people could enter at once. Rona attempted to control the groups by counting shoulders, but several birders moved whenever they thought Jasper might say something important. Hamish remained outside with Callum Fraser, a freckled boy in a red woolen hat. Callum poked at the reeds with a walking pole. "Don't do that," his mother said. "You'll frighten the bird. It's no there." Myrie Fraser glanced at Hamish. "He means he cannot see it." A sensible difference, said Hamish. Callum stared toward a flat stone near the edge of the path. Inside the hide, Jasper said, The habitat is suitable. Suitability and presence are not the same thing. Rona looked offended on behalf of the habitat. After all three groups had taken their turn, nobody had seen a curlew. A robin landed on the hide roof and received more photographs than it wanted. On the return walk, Rona stopped again at the blue marker. Eyelid will now play the recorded call. Eyelid removed a small grey field recorder from her coat. Its corners were scratched from use. She pressed the button. Wind hissed softly. Then came a thin, rising call, lonely and clear. Several birders smiled. A pause followed. Just before the second call, Hamish heard a tiny click. Tick then the note. Eyelid played the recording again. The same click came in exactly the same place. Jasper held out his hand. May I? He listened twice. His head tilted. Promising, he said. Rona relaxed. But not proof, Jasper added. The regional committee accepted it, she said, for preliminary review. Eyelid took the recorder back. You think I made it up? I think certainty should be earned. That sounds well on television. The words were quiet, but they reached him. Jasper smiled without warmth. My dear, television is where certainty costs the most. Eyelid put the recorder into her pocket. As the group moved away, Hamish remained beside the marker. Natural sounds did not repeat so neatly. Wind altered. Water shifted. Birds moved their heads and changed distance. The little click had returned unchanged. Callum still stood near the flat stone, studying it rather than the sky. When he noticed Hamish watching, he hurried after his mother. Hamish looked at the stone. There was nothing remarkable about it, but somebody had placed it neatly over a patch of ground where the reeds did not grow. Chapter 3. Soup, Slogans, and a Famous Man. By 7 that evening, the village hall smelled of damp coats, lentil soup, and people trying to behave well in front of strangers. Rona had arranged the chairs in neat rows beneath a paper sign. Lochdubh Community Conservation Supper. Our land, our responsibility. Someone had added, in pencil, our soup. Your donation. Rona had rubbed it out, though the words remained faintly visible. Mrs. Patel stood behind 3 soup pots, correcting volunteers who had mixed the plain oatcakes with the cheese ones. People have allergies, she said. To cheese? Asked one girl. To carelessness. Hamish accepted a bowl and sat near the wall. The bird-watchers filled the front tables, while crofters and fishermen chose seats nearer the door. Between them sat villagers who wished to hear both sides before repeating whichever one proved more interesting. Callum Fraser was drawing on the back of a programme. His bird had a round body and legs long enough to cross the loch. That a curlew? Hamish asked. Callum covered it with his hand. It's only a bird. A safe occupation. Myrie Fraser, his mother, was sorting raffle tickets beside him. He has been talking about that path all afternoon. Callum looked sharply at her. Myrie corrected herself. About the walk. Hamish said nothing. He had learned that silence often made people hear what they had nearly admitted. Jasper Lorne arrived 10 minutes late. He wore a dark jacket and a grey shirt open at the neck. His hair looked untouched by mist, rain, or ordinary weather. Rona hurried to meet him. We were beginning to worry. I was speaking to my producer. About tomorrow's filming? About whether there is anything to film? Rona's smile held. Eyelid brought Jasper a bowl of soup. Her hand shook slightly, spilling a little over the rim. I'm sorry. No harm done, said Jasper, dabbing the bowl with a napkin. Even soup must find its level. Eyelid moved away without answering. Jasper sat beside Hamish. Excellent soup. Mrs. Patel made it. Then the weekend has produced one confirmed success. Hamish ate. Jasper leaned back and surveyed the hall. Your organizer dislikes me. Rona? The quiet one. Eyelid doesna dislike quickly. Then I have been efficient. Across the room, Angus McCrae entered in his work coat. Conversation dipped. He paid Mrs. Patel for soup and took a seat at the back. Rona tapped a spoon against a glass. She welcomed the visitors, thanked the volunteers, and spoke of grants, partnerships, and sustainable rural opportunity. By the fourth use of the word sustainable, the large birder from Perth had eaten 3 bowls of soup and looked more durable than anyone. Then Rona introduced Jasper. He stepped onto the small platform and waited for the room to settle. "When people think of the Highlands," he began, "they often think of emptiness." Angus glanced around the crowded hall. "But there is no empty land," Jasper continued. "There is only land whose life we have failed to notice." It was a good line, and he knew it. He spoke of wetlands, shrinking habitats, and the duty of rural communities to protect what remained. His voice softened for future generations and hardened for commercial development. "This weekend may help Lochdubh understand that what it possesses is not merely scenery but responsibility." Hamish saw Angus put down his spoon. Jasper continued. "Rural communities must learn to value what they have before the wider world is forced to value it for them." "We know what we have," Angus said. Rona closed her eyes briefly. Jasper looked toward the back. "I am sure many of you do." "Many of us?" No offence was intended. "That's fortunate. You manage enough of it by accident." A fisherman coughed into his hand. Rona stepped down from the platform. "Angus, please." He stands there explaining the place, as if none of us noticed it before television. "The evening is meant to encourage cooperation. It's my lambing field he wants closed." Jasper raised one hand. "Land can carry many claims. Agricultural, historical, emotional, and ecological." "Aye," said Angus. "And promotional." A few people laughed. Jasper's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes cooled. "You threatened me this morning. I told you, if you blocked my gate again, I'd put you into the reeds." The side door opened. Blair entered in a heavy coat, followed by Macnab. He smelled faintly of cigarettes and wet car upholstery. "What's going on?" "No trouble," said Hamish. Blair looked from Angus to Jasper. "It sounds like trouble." It was a speech. "In my experience, speeches are trouble with chairs." Angus pulled on his cap. "I'm away." At the door, he turned to Jasper. "You want to watch birds, watch them. But keep out of my field." Then he left. The hall remained silent until Mrs. Patel began collecting bowls. That small domestic sound released everyone. Blair seized Hamish by the elbow and took him outside. Cold mist drifted across the car park. Blair lit a cigarette beneath the eaves. "What did I tell you? That smoking near public buildings is unpopular. I told you no village circus." "It was a supper. There's press coming tomorrow. If this becomes an embarrassment, I'll have you transferred." "You say that every month. This time I mean it." "Where?" "Somewhere with traffic lights." "That seems severe." Blair stepped closer. "Keep McCrae away from Lorne. Keep the locals smiling. And stop asking questions about that recording until the weekend is over." Hamish looked at him. "I didn't tell you the recording was doubtful." Rona said there were concerns. "There are. Then ignore them." Hamish's voice stayed mild. "I'm no good at ignoring things once they begin repeating themselves." Blair stared at him, then crushed his cigarette beneath his shoe. "Remember who gives the orders." Back inside, the raffle had begun. Mrs. Todd from Perth won waterproof socks and announced they were the wrong size. Jasper stood near the display boards with Rona and Eyelid. Hamish approached as Jasper said, "I cannot endorse the application tomorrow." Rona gripped her clipboard. "You agreed to support it." "I agreed to review the evidence." The committee accepted the recording. "For preliminary review." Eyelid placed a cup on the table too firmly. "The recording is genuine." Jasper turned to her. "Then find me the bird." "You know it does not work like that. Public claims work exactly like that." Rana lowered her voice. "A withdrawal now would damage the village." "To whom?" Jasper asked. Neither woman answered. Jasper noticed Hamish. "Constable, a word." Rona moved away, taking Eyelid with her. Jasper waited until they were out of hearing. "The sighting is too convenient." "The bird appeared in the field threatened by cabins," said Hamish. "Precisely. No photograph. No independent witness. A recording with a mechanical flaw. The click. You heard it." "Ah, yeah." Jasper glanced toward Eyelid. Ask who benefits if that field is protected. Angus doesna. No. Which makes him useful. To whom? Jasper smiled slightly. That is what I intend to discover. He took his coat from a chair. I'll be at the Hyde before dawn. Alone? I have spent 30 years in wet fields without police assistance. You've maybe never spent enough time in Lochdubh. Jasper laughed and left by the side door. Across the hall, people were already turning the evening into stories. Angus had threatened Jasper. Jasper had insulted the village. The Curlew was real. The Curlew was invented. Rona said everything remained under control. Eyelid stood beside the empty soup pots, holding the field recorder in both hands. She looked not at Jasper's departing figure, but at the disputed field beyond the dark windows. And Hamish wondered whether she was afraid of losing the land, or of someone finding out why it had suddenly become worth saving. Chapter 4. The Hyde in the Mist. Hamish was woken before 6 by someone hammering on the police station door. Luggs raised his head beside the stove, decided the emergency belonged to humans, and lowered it again. Eyelid Ross stood outside in a wet coat, breathing hard. "It's Jasper," she said. "He's in the Hyde." Hamish pulled on his jacket. "What happened?" "I think he's dead." The Reedbed path was almost hidden by mist. Water gathered on the stone wall, and the reeds gave small, dry whispers whenever the wind moved through them. Eyelid walked quickly, but without looking, toward the disputed field. "You were meeting him?" Hamish asked. "At 6. He wanted my father's records, and the original recording." "Why?" "He said he would make a final decision before the press arrived." "Did anyone else know?" Rona knew he had questions. "Not about the meeting." Hamish glanced at her. Eyelid's answers were neat, but she held her canvas satchel so tightly that the strap cut into her hand. The Hyde appeared ahead as a dark shape above the pale reeds. Its door stood open. Eyelid stopped at the steps. "I did not touch anything." "You went inside?" "Only far enough to see him." Hamish climbed alone. Jasper Lorne lay between the viewing bench and the back wall. One shoulder rested against the boards, his legs twisted beneath the bench. There was no blood, only a fallen metal flask and coffee spreading through a groove in the floor. A notebook lay open beside him. Hamish crouched. Jasper's face was turned toward the side window. His own binoculars rested neatly on the front bench, facing the lock. Too neatly. The boards near the long viewing slit were mostly dry. By the side window, however, there was fine grey silt, the sort found along the Reedbed path rather than in Angus's upper field. Hamish studied the glass. Mist had formed on the inside. In the lower corner was a curved green mark, a crescent. It resembled the smudge left on Jasper's cheek by the split rubber eye cup, but darker, as though the binoculars had been pressed directly against the pane. The side window did not face the open loch. It looked back along the path toward the blue marker and the flat stone. Someone had been watching the watchers. Eyelid spoke from the doorway. Was it his heart? "I don't know." He was older than he looked. "That's common with television." She did not smile. Hamish pointed toward the road. "Go back and stop the Dawn group. Tell them there's been a death, and no one is to come down here. What about the press? They can admire the car park." When she had gone, Hamish radioed Strathbane and asked for Macnab, the doctor, and the scene team. He then examined the notebook without moving it. Several lines had blurred from damp, but some remained readable. Windwrong for reported call. Below it, E.R. knows more. At the bottom of the page, ask who signed before verification. E.R. might mean Eyelid Ross, or it might be what Jasper wanted someone to think. Hamish stepped outside. A small figure moved beside the wall below. Callum Fraser stood off the path in his red woolen hat, staring toward the flat stone. "Callum." The boy froze. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for the bird." "You heard about Jasper?" Callum nodded. "Were you on this path last night?" "No." The word came too quickly. "Did you see anyone near the Hyde?" Callum looked back toward the village. "My mum says talking makes things worse. Sometimes not talking does. She says Eyelid's had enough." "Enough of what?" But Callum turned and ran uphill. Hamish watched him disappear into the mist. A car door slammed near the road. Blair's voice carried down the path. What has happened now? He arrived in unsuitable shoes, followed by MacNab and Rona Dempster. Rona still carried her clipboard, though there was nothing left to organise. Blair climbed into the hide, looked once at Jasper, and came out again. Angus McCrae. Hamish leaned against the rail. That was quick. Public threat. Land dispute. Dead man. He's in a hide. Not the reeds. Don't be clever. I'm helping with accuracy. Rona stared through the open door. He cannot be dead. I spoke to him last night. Blair turned. When? After the supper. At his hotel. What about? His endorsement. And? He said he would withdraw it, unless the bird was confirmed. Eyelid had returned to the foot of the steps. She looked at Rona. You did not tell me you went to see him. It was trust business. He was meeting me this morning. Rona's composure slipped for a second. Why? To examine the original recording. Blair looked between them with interest. Who submitted the sighting? I did, said Eyelid. And who signed the protection application? Rona tightened her grip on the clipboard. I did. Blair's face brightened with the unpleasant pleasure of finding more than one easy suspect. MacNab entered the hide and examined the floor. Hamish said, Look at the side glass. MacNab bent toward the green crescent. What made that? A split binocular eye cup. Jasper's? His are black. Blair came back up the steps. McCrae could have borrowed the club pair. He could have, said Hamish. So could anyone. Blair pointed toward Eyelid. Where are those binoculars now? At the bird club table, she said. Are you sure? Eyelid hesitated. They should be. That pause was enough for Blair. Hamish looked beyond them toward the field. The mist was thinning, revealing the fence, the marker post, and the rough ground Angus needed for his sheep. By breakfast, Lochdubh would have 3 stories. Angus killed Jasper in anger. Eyelid killed him to protect her lie. Rona killed him to protect the application. All 3 would be repeated with confidence. But the green mark was on the wrong window. The mud came from the wrong path, and Jasper's binoculars had been placed in the wrong position. Someone had arranged the scene for people who preferred an obvious story. And Blair, Hamish thought, was already standing exactly where that person wanted him. Chapter 5. Blair finds a man who fits. By 9 o'clock, Blair had decided Angus McCrae was guilty. The decision had improved his mood. Angus stood beside the lambing shed with mud on his boots and no patience left. Blair questioned him loudly enough for the sheep to hear. MacNab waited nearby with a notebook. Hamish leaned against the gate. You threatened Lorne in front of witnesses, Blair said. I told him to keep out of my field. You said you would throw him into the reeds. Ah, yea, and now he is dead beside them. In the hide, said Hamish. Blair turned. Must you correct everything? Only what's wrong. Angus folded his arms. You think I killed him because he annoyed me? I think he threatened your livelihood. He threatened half the village. That is not a denial. It was to anyone listening. Blair stepped closer. Where were you between midnight and 6? In bed until 4:30. Then here. Anyone confirm that? My mother. Blair gave a short laugh. Convenient. She's 82. Convenience has never been her strongest quality. A ewe called from inside the shed. Angus looked toward it. Blair noticed. Nervous? One of them is about to lamb. Show us the boots you wore this morning. Angus looked down. They're on my feet. The boots were heavy, cracked, and thick with dark peat. Hamish crouched beside them. The mud contained grass, straw, and black hill soil. The floor of the hide had held fine grey reedbed silt. The difference was small, but firm, Blair said. He could have cleaned another pair. He could have flown there, said Hamish. But there's no evidence of that either. Blair glared at him. What about binoculars? Angus pointed into the shed. An old pair rested on a shelf beside baling twine and veterinary bottles. Hamish picked them up. Both eye cups were hard black rubber, scratched but intact. No green, he said. McCrae could have borrowed the club pair, Blair replied. He could. Did anyone see him do it? No one sees anything in this village until gossip requires it. Angus pulled open the shed door. At 4:30, Myrie Nicholson came for me. One of her ewes was in trouble. Ask her. Blair's face tightened. Why did you not say so? You asked where I was. Then you shouted before I finished. McNab wrote the name down. Blair pointed at Angus. Do not leave Lochdubh. I have 14 ewes near Lambing. Where would I go? When Blair reached the police car, he stopped and turned back. I'll obtain a warrant for the shed. You'll obtain proper grounds first, Angus said. Blair started forward. Hamish stepped between them. Leave it. Move, Macbeth. You can investigate him or bully him. You'll no do both while I'm here. Hamish's voice remained low. That made it carry. Blair's face darkened. You forget who gives the orders. No. I'm remembering who must answer for them. McNab shut his notebook. Blair looked from one man to the other, then strode away. After the car had gone, Angus let out a breath. He'll arrest me. Maybe. You sound comforting. I'm no trained for it. Angus lifted a feed sack. I did threaten Jasper. I heard. I meant it. That's the trouble with public threats. Folk rarely remember the part after the anger. Angus tightened the sack cord. He was going to ruin Eyelid. Hamish watched him. How? He'd expose the bird. You believe she invented it? I believe she wanted the field protected badly enough to stop asking whether the story was true. You spoke to her last night? Behind the hall. What did she say? That I was making things worse. And you? I told her lies do not improve when defended politely. There was old hurt in his voice. You and Eyelid were close once, Hamish said. Her father and mine worked together. We grew up in each other's kitchens. And now? Now she thinks I want to sell every stone her father touched. Do you? Angus looked toward the field. I want somewhere for the ewes. She wants somewhere her father still seems alive. Both of us call it land because grief sounds foolish at a meeting. Inside the shed, the ewe called again. Angus went to her without another word. The Strathbane canteen served a pale pie in thin gravy. Blair ate with the concentration of a man punishing his lunch. The doctor confirms a blow to the head, he said. Lorne struck the corner of the bench. Before or after he fell? Not yet certain. So we're not certain of murder. Do not be difficult. Hamish pressed his fork into the crust. It resisted briefly, then collapsed. Angus has an alibi after 4:30. Jasper could have died earlier. He arranged to meet Eyelid at 6. He may have arrived during the night. Why? To watch the bird. With his binoculars neatly placed on the bench? Blair stopped chewing. What are you suggesting? That somebody wanted it to look as if he had been watching the loch. Blair wiped his mouth. Angus met him, they argued. Angus pushed him. Then Angus took the club binoculars, pressed them against the side window and returned them. Blair frowned. What green mark? Hamish explained the crescent on the glass. McCrae used them, Blair said. For what? To watch the path. Then why arrange Jasper's own binoculars at the front? Blair returned to his meal. You think too much. That hasna troubled the investigation so far. Blair pointed his fork. The newspapers are calling it the Curlew killing. We need progress. They need a headline. Same thing. Hamish pushed the plate away. Mrs. Patel's shop was warm and smelled of lentils, spices, and damp newspapers. She placed a bowl of soup before Hamish. You look as if Strathbane fed you. It tried. She began arranging tins on a shelf. People say Angus has been arrested. He hasna. They say blood was found on his boots. It was mud. By evening, it will be blood and feathers. Can you stop it? Mrs. Patel looked at him. No. Slow it? No. He ate the soup. Eyelid came in early, she said. What time? About 20 to 6. What did she buy? Batteries. For the field recorder? She did not say. Was she alone? Yes. Rona's car was outside the hall, but I did not see Rona. The shop door opened. Myrie Fraser entered with Callum behind her. The boy had hidden his red hat inside his coat pocket. When he saw Hamish, he stopped. Myri placed a loaf on the counter. "We're in a hurry." Mrs. Patel looked at the loaf. "You have not paid." Myri put down coins. Hamish turned to Callum. "You were near the hide this morning." The boy lowered his eyes. "He was looking for the bird," Myri said. "And last night?" "He was in bed." Callum's face changed slightly. Hamish noticed pale grey silt on his jacket cuff. "Were you near the flat stone?" The boy looked up sharply. Myri stepped between them. "That is enough. He is a child. He may have seen something." "He saw nothing." Callum whispered. "Mum?" She gripped his arm. "We are leaving." Mrs. Patel held out the change. Myri ignored it and pulled Callum outside. Through the window, Hamish saw her bend toward him. She did not look angry. She looked frightened. Mrs. Patel followed his gaze. "She helps Eyelid with the bird club stall." "Ah, yeah. She is loyal." "Loyalty can make a poor witness." Hamish finished the soup and stepped outside. Across the road, Rona was tearing a sheet of paper from the village notice board. Hamish reached her before she folded it. "Fake Curlew scandal," someone had written. Beneath it, "Ask Eyelid Ross." Rona crushed the paper. Who told them? No one needed to. They had a question and an afternoon. This will destroy her. Did Jasper know the recording was false? It was not false. That wasna what I asked. Rona's hand tightened around the paper. He was going to write about it. What exactly? That the sighting was unreliable. That the trust had exaggerated evidence. Had it? She looked away. Hamish thought of Callum's muddy cuff, Eyelid's batteries, the repeated click on the recording, and the green crescent on the wrong window. Blair had found a man who fit the village's anger. Hamish was beginning to look for the person who had needed the village to hear a bird that might never have been there. Chapter 6. Hamish's good turn goes wrong. Hamish made the mistake of asking Mrs. Patel to keep something quiet. He did it shortly after lunch, while she was stacking tins of tomatoes into a pyramid no customer would dare disturb. "The recording may have been staged," he said. "I need time to test it." Mrs. Patel placed another tin on top. "And you are telling me because?" "Because folk listen to you. They listen badly. I'm asking you not to repeat it." She looked at him over her spectacles. "I do not repeat gossip." "Good. I correct it. Please correct nothing until tomorrow." Mrs. Patel considered this. "You want me to say nothing if someone asks whether Eyelid faked the bird?" "I want you to say the police are still checking." "That sounds like yes in a uniform." "It isna. It will be by TA time." Hamish should have recognised a warning when he heard one. By 3 o'clock, the story had crossed the village twice and improved itself on both journeys. At the garage, Hamish had accused Eyelid of hiding a loudspeaker in the reeds. At the hotel, he had found imported curlew feathers in her cottage. By the time the Curry sisters reached the police station, Nessie had heard that Eyelid kept 3 stuffed birds beneath her bed, while Jessie believed there were 4, but one might be a heron. "We are not saying we believe it," Nessie explained. "No," said Jessie. "We are only saying that people are saying it." "Which people?" asked Hamish. Nessie looked surprised. "People who have heard." "From whom?" Jessie thought. "Other people." Hamish closed the station door before the conversation produced a 5th bird. Across the road, volunteers were dismantling the rare bird weekend stalls. Nobody had formally cancelled the event, but visitors had begun leaving after learning that the dawn programme had included a dead television naturalist. Rona stood near the hall entrance, directing boxes into a van. Her movements were brisk enough to look efficient from a distance and furious at closer range. Eyelid emerged carrying a stack of unused programmes. 2 women beside the van stopped talking. They smiled at her. It was a careful smile, the sort offered to someone recently bereaved, publicly accused, or carrying unstable soup. Eyelid saw it. She put the programmes into a box and went back inside without speaking. Hamish crossed the road. Rona met him at the door. "What have you done?" "I have been wondering that myself. Everyone says you accused her. I did no such thing. You told Mrs. Patel the recording was false." "I said it might have been staged." Rana stared at him. "You told Mrs. Patel?" "I asked her to keep it quiet." "Then you might as well have put it on the church notice board." Mrs. Patel passing with a kettle, said, "The church board has poorer circulation." Hamish followed Rona into the hall. Most of the chairs had been folded. The conservation banner lay across a table beside unopened seed catalogues and a plate of shop biscuits nobody had wanted. Eyelid stood near the kitchen hatch, winding the cable around the field recorder. "Eyelid?" Hamish said. She did not look up. "I didna accuse you." "No. You merely asked the village not to repeat the accusation. I was trying to protect you until I knew more." "That went well." Her voice was quiet, which made the words harder. "I'm sorry." She finished winding the cable. "My father used to say there were two kinds of silence here. The kind that kept a confidence, and the kind that waited for someone else to speak first." Hamish leaned against the table. "Which is this?" "The second." Rona said, "You should not answer any more questions." Eyelid looked at her. "I am not under arrest." "Not yet, if Blair has anything to do with it." As if summoned by irritation, Blair entered through the main doors. He had brought Macnab and a copy of the Inverness paper folded beneath his arm. The headline read, "TV Naturalist Dies in Fake Bird Village." Blair slapped it onto the table. Macbeth. Hamish examined the headline. "They've used quotation marks. Do not be clever. I was looking for journalism." Blair pointed at the paper. "How did they hear the recording was fake?" "Someone spoke to the press." "Someone always speaks to the press here." Rona stepped forward. "This is damaging the trust. A man is dead," Blair said. "Your reputation can wait." Her face tightened, but she said nothing. Blair turned to Eyelid. "I want the recorder, the original audio file, and every notebook relating to the sighting." "You may have them with a receipt," she said. "You are in no position to make demands." Hamish's voice sharpened. "She is entitled to a record of what you take." Blair swung toward him. "You caused this mess." "I caused gossip. I didna kill Jasper." "Not for lack of damaging the inquiry." Macnab moved quietly between them and held out an evidence form. "I'll list everything." Eyelid handed him the recorder. Her fingers remained on it for a moment before letting go. Blair said, "Where were you between 11 and midnight?" "At the hall kitchen." "All night?" "Until 12:15. "Witnesses?" "Several." Rona said, "I saw her at 11:30. "Doing what?" "Washing soup pots." Eyelid looked at Rona. "You left before then." Rona paused. "I came back." "When?" "Shortly after 11. You said this morning you were at Jasper's hotel." "I was." "Then I returned." Hamish watched them. The exchange was small, but not meaningless. Each woman knew the other's movements well enough to correct them, yet neither had offered the full account until pressed. Blair noticed only that their stories were untidy. "Macnab, take statements from everyone in the kitchen." Macnab nodded. Blair looked at Hamish. "And you will stop discussing evidence with shopkeepers." Mrs. Patel called from the hatch. He discussed uncertainty. Blair ignored her. "Another leak, Macbeth, and I'll have you transferred before the funeral." "To the traffic lights? This is no joke." "No," said Hamish. "It's only repetitive." Blair left with Macnab and the recorder. Eyelid took her coat from a chair. Rona said, "Where are you going?" "Home. You should stay where people can see you." Eyelid gave her a tired look. "That seems to be the trouble." She walked out. Hamish followed at a distance. Outside, the afternoon had cleared. Cold light lay across the loch, making every wall and fence line seem sharper. Eyelid crossed the road with her head down. Near the shop, Callum Fraser stood beside his mother. He looked at Eyelid, then at Hamish. Myrie placed a hand on his shoulder and turned him away. Hamish approached them. "Callum, I need to ask you something." Myrie's face closed. "He has already told you he saw nothing." "He hasna told me anything." "And he will not." Callum whispered, "Mum, I only saw—" She gripped his shoulder. "Enough." Hamish lowered his voice. "If he saw someone on the Reedbed path, keeping quiet may protect the wrong person." Myrie looked toward Eyelid, who was disappearing up the road. "You do not understand what this village does to a woman once it decides she has lied." "I'm beginning to. She has lost her father, the field, and now her name. I will not help Blair, Take the rest." Callum stared at the ground. Hamish saw fear in him, but also frustration. The boy wanted to speak. He had simply been taught that truth belonged to adults who could survive it. Hamish stepped back. "I'll no force him." Maire's relief came too quickly. "But I'll ask again." That evening, the village became unusually polite to Eyelid Ross. Nobody accused her in public. People lowered their voices when she passed. 2 women offered to carry her shopping. Someone left flowers beside her cottage gate without a card. In Lochdubh, kindness could sometimes feel like the first stage of a verdict. Hamish stood outside the police station, watching the light fade over the disputed field. He had tried to prevent harm by controlling a rumour. Instead, he had given it the shape of official suspicion. And somewhere beneath that growing shame, a frightened boy still held one small fact about the night Jasper died. Chapter 7. Sonsie at the Reedbed. By evening, the wind had shifted. The mist was gone, and cold light stretched across the loch. Sounds carried farther than they had all weekend. Sheep calling from the upper field, a van door closing near the shop, someone hammering badly at a loose gate. Hamish walked alone toward the Reedbed. He had left Lugs at the station with half a biscuit and no useful opinion. The village had grown too watchful for company. At the blue marker, he stopped. The flat stone lay where Callum had stared at it during the guided walk. Hamish crouched and lifted one edge. Beneath it was a shallow hollow in the earth. Inside lay a square of waxed cloth. He unfolded it carefully. The cloth held a cheap field speaker and a short lead, damp but still intact. It was not clever equipment. It did not need to be. Hidden under the stone, it could make a recorded call seem to rise from the reeds beyond the path. Hamish switched it on. A red light flickered. He connected the recorder lead recovered from the Bird Club kit and played the Curlew clip. Wind hissed. The first rising note came across the field. Then the faint click, tick, followed by the second call. Exactly the same. From the path, it sounded as though the bird were calling from the old grazing boundary. From the hide, the source lay below and to the right. That explained the green crescent on the side window. Whoever had used the split eye-cup binoculars had looked down toward the hidden speaker, not across the loch. Hamish switched off the recording. A movement came from the wall. Sonsie stood on the top stones, tail hanging still behind him. The cat watched the reeds with the concentration of a creature who did not confuse nature with a public event. "You've no respect for conservation committees," Hamish said. Sonsie jumped down and disappeared behind the hide. Hamish followed. The ground there was softer than the public path. A patch of reeds had been pressed flat beside the rear supports. Someone had knelt there, hidden from anyone approaching the front steps. Hamish crouched. A person in that position could watch the hide door, the side window, and the path from the village. Not birds. People. There were old footprints, blurred by rain. One was narrow at the heel. Another mark suggested a knee pressed into the silt. Hamish looked toward the field. The recorded call had not merely been played. Someone had chosen its position carefully, so the sound would seem to come from land that needed protection. The lie had required patience. A small sound came from the reeds behind him. Sonsie emerged, carrying something green between his teeth. The cat dropped it near Hamish's boot and sat down. It was a torn crescent of rubber. Hamish picked it up by the edge. "Faded green. Split along one side. The missing piece from the club binocular eye-cup." "Good cat," he said. Sonsie turned away as if the praise had been unnecessary. Hamish slipped the rubber into an evidence envelope. Then he heard a shoe scrape on the path. Callum Fraser stood beside the marker post. This time he had come without his mother. "You found it," he said. "The speaker?" Callum nodded. "You knew it was there." "I saw Eyelid put it under the stone." "When?" "Monday evening, before the first recording." Hamish waited. Callum looked toward the village. "She said it was only to play back the call and check whether the sound carried." "Did you believe her?" "At first." "And after?" "She came again on Friday night. She took the recorder away." "What time?" "About 11:45. That matched the end of the recording." "Did you see her go to the hide?" "No." "Did you see anyone else?" Callum hesitated. A woman. Who? I couldna see her face. She wore a dark coat and carried binoculars. Which direction? From the whole path. She went behind the hide first. The same place where someone knelt? Callum nodded. Then she went inside? I think so. Jasper was already there. How do you know? I heard his voice. What did he say? Callum rubbed his sleeve. He said, You've turned grief into paperwork. Then the woman said he did not understand what was at stake. Hamish kept his face still. Did you recognise her voice? Callum looked frightened again. I thought it was Eilid. Thought? She and Rona sound alike when they whisper. Quiet and sharp. What happened next? There was a bang inside the hide. Then someone came out. Who? I hid. Did you see the coat? Only the bottom. Dark. Clean boots. Not Angus, then. What did the person carry? The green binoculars. Hamish looked down at the rubber fragment in the envelope. Why did you no tell me? Callum's eyes filled, though he did not cry. Mum said if I named Eilid, everyone would say she killed him. She said Eilid had only tried to save the field. That doesn't mean she killed Jasper. I know. Does your mother know you saw another woman? No. I only told her I saw Eilid with the recorder. Hamish stood. You've done the right thing now. Callum looked doubtful. Will Eilid be arrested? Not for hiding a speaker. But she lied. Ah, ye. Is that enough? For shame? Often. For murder? No. They walked back toward the village together. At the top of the path, Hamish turned once more toward the hide. Eilid had created the false bird. But another woman had gone there after the recording stopped, carrying the club binoculars. The person who began the lie and the person who killed to preserve it might not be the same. And in Lochdubh, that difference could save one life while ruining another. Chapter 8. The Woman Who Loved the Field. Eilid's cottage stood at the edge of the village where the road narrowed between a stone wall and a row of wind-bent rowans. Hamish found her in the kitchen, sorting papers into 3 careful piles. One held bird records. One held legal letters about the grazing field. The third held nothing at all. You've come to arrest me, she said. No. Blair will be disappointed. He survives it often. She looked tired rather than frightened. The curtains were open, though dusk had begun to darken the window. On the table sat a blue teapot, 2 clean cups, and a plate with 1 untouched oatcake. You knew I was coming? I knew someone would. Hamish took the chair opposite her. The cottage was small and orderly. Shelves held field guides, old survey maps and notebooks labelled in a narrow hand. A pair of muddy boots stood beside the stove. Above them hung a faded photograph of Eilid as a girl beside her father, both kneeling in the disputed field with a lamb between them. Her father's face had the weathered patience of a man, accustomed to losing arguments to rain. Hamish nodded toward the papers. Your father's records? Most of them. Did he ever record curlews in that field? Eilid folded her hands. Passing birds. Years ago. This season? No. The word came quietly. Hamish waited. She looked toward the photograph. The cabin proposal arrived in February. 6 holiday units, access road, parking area. They called the field underused. Angus uses it. Only seasonally. That made it easier to dismiss. And the trust needed evidence of ecological value. Yes. So you made some. Her eyes came back to him. I heard a curlew beyond the North Ridge, but not in the disputed field. No. You recorded it? I used an old recording from my father's archive. The tick was already on the file. A damaged tape transfer. And you played it under the flat stone. Her mouth tightened. Callum told you. He saw enough. Eilid stood and went to the kettle, though it was already hot. I thought if the committee delayed the lease, we could commission a proper survey. Perhaps something else would be found. Nesting snipe, water vole signs, orchids, anything true. Yes. She poured tea into both cups. I told myself I was only buying time. Lies are often cheapest at the beginning. She gave him a bitter look. You think I don't know that now? Hamish accepted the cup. Why that field? You know why. Tell me. Tell me. She sat again. My father lost almost everything slowly. First his health, then the larger grazing lease, then the strength to climb the hill. The lower field was the last place he could still work. Her voice remained controlled, but her thumb rubbed the rim of the cup. He kept lambing notes, rainfall, birds, first frost. After he died, people called the notebooks charming. They had never called the work charming while he was alive. Hamish said nothing. The cabins would have covered the place where he taught me to identify lapwing nests. They would have named them something like Curlew View. That would have been unfortunate. She almost smiled. Rona said emotion would not stop development. Evidence might. So she knew? Eyelid looked down. She knew the first sighting was uncertain. That is not the same answer. She knew. From the beginning? After the first committee meeting. I told her I had overstated the location, and she continued with the application. She said we had already attracted regional interest. She said withdrawing would guarantee the cabins. Who suggested the rare bird weekend? Rona. Who invited Jasper? Rona. Eyelid lifted the cup, then set it down without drinking. She believed publicity would make the protection impossible to reverse, until Jasper examined the recording. Yes. What did he say to you after the supper? That he knew the call had been placed. He had worked out the wind direction and the repeat in the file. He threatened to expose you? He said he would write about the sentimental corruption of rural conservation. He enjoyed the phrase. Did you meet him at the Hyde? No. You arranged to meet him at 6. I did. I meant to give him everything, and ask him not to name my father. Hamish watched her. Where were you before that? At the hall kitchen until after midnight. Then I went home. Callum saw you at the Reedbed before midnight. Eyelid closed her eyes. I collected the recorder. At 11:42? Yes. Did you see Jasper? No. Another woman went toward the Hyde carrying the club binoculars. Her eyes opened. Rona, you sound sure? She knew where the recorder was. She knew Jasper had gone to the Hyde. How? He telephoned her from the hotel. She came back to the hall, furious. What did she say? That he intended to humiliate all of us. All of you? The trust. The village. Me. Mostly herself? Eyelid did not answer. Hamish placed his cup on the table. Where are the green binoculars? They should be at the club table. One eye cup is missing. I noticed the pair was gone when Blair asked. Did you sign them out? No. Rona? The book may say she did. May? Eyelid's face hardened. She sometimes signed equipment out under volunteers' names. She said it saved confusion. What name would she use? Mine. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Hamish looked at the empty third pile of papers. What was meant to go there? Letters from donors. Why is it empty? Rona took them yesterday. What did they promise? A protected site. A permanent Hyde. Educational visits. She had described the Curlew project as a confirmed success before the review was finished. So if Jasper exposed the recording, you would be shamed. Yes. And Rona? She would lose her position. Perhaps face an investigation. Eyelid looked again at the photograph. I began it. That doesn't make you responsible for everything done afterward. It feels close enough. Hamish rose. At the door, he stopped beside the hanging photograph. Angus said your father knew every bird in that field. He did. He also said grief sounds foolish at meetings. Eyelid's expression shifted. Angus said that? Yeah. For a moment, she looked less alone. Then she asked, Do you believe I killed Jasper? No. Why? Because you hid the sound to make people look toward the field. He opened the door. The person in the Hyde was looking back toward you. Chapter 9. The wrong kind of silence. The difficulty with village alibis was that they often proved where a person was expected to be, rather than where anyone had actually seen them. By breakfast, Blair had collected 6 statements placing Eyelid in the hall kitchen after midnight. One woman remembered her washing soup pots. Another remembered her drying them. A third had not seen Eyelid at all, but was certain she must have been there because the pots were clean in the morning. Blair spread the statements across Hamish's desk. There you are. There I am. Where? Ross lied about the bird. Lorne discovered it. She followed him to the hide and killed him. Hamish looked through the papers. 3 folk say she was in the hall. They are protecting her. Yesterday you said every witness against Angus was reliable. Different witnesses. Convenient. Blair tapped Jasper's notebook. E.R. knows more. She did know more, and the binoculars were signed out in her name. Macnab, standing near the filing cabinet, opened the Bird Club equipment book. The entry read, Pair, 3E, Ross. The handwriting was neat, upright, and familiar. Hamish looked toward Macnab. Compare it with Rona's signature on the trust papers. Macnab placed the 2 pages side by side. The capital E in Eiled's name had a narrow lower loop. So did the E in Rona's handwritten note beside the grant figures. The final S leaned forward in both. Blair frowned. That proves nothing. It proves Eilid didna write it. Rona may have signed it out for her. Aye, said Hamish. That's what Eilid said. Blair gathered the statements into a rough pile. Then Rona helped her. Or used her name. For what purpose? To make us ask the question you're asking. Blair stared at him. Hamish took the copied audio log from the evidence envelope. The recorder file ended at 11:42. Eilid collected the recorder then, he said. Callum saw her leave the Reedbed. She returned to the hall. According to her. According to the kitchen clock and Mrs. Patel. Blair snorted. The shopkeeper sees everything. Only the useful things. Mrs. Patel had remembered Eilid entering through the rear hall door at 11:53, carrying the waxed cloth beneath her coat. At midnight, she had asked for a clean towel. At 12:10, 2 volunteers had seen her leave by the front entrance. Blair pointed at Jasper's estimated time of death. He died between 11:30 and 1. A wide window. Wide enough. Hamish looked at the notebook again. Jasper had written after the recorder stopped. One line referred to the speaker being removed. Another mentioned donor promises and a signed application. He had still been alive when Eilid returned to the hall. Someone else had gone to the hide afterward. Macnab said, Callum described clean boots. Ross could have changed them, Blair replied. She bought batteries before 6, wearing muddy ones, said Hamish. Mrs. Patel remembers because Eilid left silt by the counter. Blair leaned back. You're determined to clear her. I'm determined, no, to confuse one lie with another. A knock came at the station door. Rona Dempster entered carrying a folder. She wore a navy coat and polished brown boots. Her hair was pinned neatly, though her eyes showed the strain of several sleepless nights. I have brought the donor correspondence, she said. Eilid claimed I removed it. You did, said Hamish. For safekeeping. From whom? The press. Blair. Anyone eager to misunderstand preliminary language? Blair held out a hand. I'll take it. Rona hesitated before surrendering the folder. Inside were letters, thanking the Trust for securing a confirmed Curlew habitat. One donor referred to the weekend as the public launch of a permanent protected reserve. The dates were earlier than Jasper's visit. You promised success before the sighting was verified, Hamish said. We had every reason to believe protection would follow. Because the bird was real? Because the site was deserving. That isna the same. Rona's composure tightened. You have seen what will happen without protection. Cabins, traffic, sewage tanks. Eilid's deception was foolish, but the field still matters. Jasper planned to publish the letters. He planned to turn a local mistake into entertainment. You met him at the hotel? Yes. And afterward? I returned to the hall. At what time? Shortly after 11. Who saw you? Rona glanced at Blair. I cannot remember. Eilid had corrected her account in the hall. Rona claimed she had returned, but no witness had placed her there before 12:20. Hamish said, Your car was outside. I walked to the hotel. And back? Yes. Along the road? Yes. Callum had seen a woman approach the hide from the hall path. Hamish looked down at Rona's boots. The soles were clean, but a faint grey line remained where leather met heel. Reedbed silt was difficult to remove from stitching. Rona followed his gaze. I walked near the loch yesterday. When? During the event. In those boots? I own more than one pair. Her answer came too smoothly. Blair said, Macbeth, have you any actual evidence? Hamish took the green rubber fragment from the evidence envelope. Rona's eyes flicked toward it. Only for a second, but she recognized it. Hamish placed it on the desk. Sonsie found this behind the hide. It matches the missing part of the club eye cup. Rona looked at Blair. Eyelid used those binoculars. The book says she did, said Hamish. In your handwriting. I often signed equipment out for volunteers. Why did you need the binoculars after midnight? I did not. You knew the speaker's location. So did Eyelid. You knew Jasper had gone to the hide. Rona's fingers pressed against the edge of her folder. He telephoned me. And what did he say? That he intended to write about the recording. Only the recording? She was silent. Hamish continued. He had found the donor letters. He knew you had built a public success before there was evidence. Eyelid would be mocked for grief. You would be investigated for money and false claims. That is absurd. No, said Hamish. It is the part you were most afraid was true. Blair stepped forward. Are you accusing her? Not yet. Rona gave a brief laugh. How generous. Hamish watched her. The bird call stopped at 11:42. Jasper wrote afterward. Eyelid was back in the hall. Angus was with a lambing ewe. Someone else went to the hide with binoculars signed out under Eyelid's name. Rona's face had become very still. Then find that person. I intend to. After she left, Blair rounded on Hamish. You let her walk out. She'll come to the Bird Club tea. How do you know? She organised it. After a murder? Especially after a murder. Rona doesn't know how to abandon a room she arranged. McNabb looked toward the door. And if she does not come? Hamish folded the donor letters. She will. She still believes appearances can save her. Outside, church bells marked 11. Across the road, volunteers were setting out folding chairs in the village hall for one final meeting. The weekend had begun with people listening for a bird they wanted to hear. It would end, Hamish thought, by making them listen to the silence between two women and to the person who had used that silence best. Chapter 10. The Bird Club Tea. The Bird Club tea began at 3, with fewer birds and more police than anyone had intended. Folding chairs filled the village hall. Binocular straps hung from their backs. Seed catalogues covered the tables, and one plate of shop biscuits sat untouched because Mrs. Patel's baking had run out first. Rona stood near the platform, checking cups. She had come, as Hamish expected. Eyelid sat beside Myrie Fraser, pale but upright. Angus remained near the rear door with his arms folded. Callum was not present. His mother had decided he had supplied enough truth for 1 week. Blair arrived with MacNab and 2 uniformed officers. "Which one am I arresting?" he asked quietly. "None yet. You said you had enough." "I said I knew what happened." "That is usually when an arrest follows. Sometimes conversation comes first." Blair looked around the hall. "This had better not turn into one of your village performances." Hamish glanced at Rona's carefully arranged cups. "It already has." Mrs. Patel rang the same brass bell she had used to announce tea on the first morning. The room settled. Rona began to speak. "This meeting was arranged to thank our volunteers and discuss the future of the conservation project." "No," said Hamish. "It was arranged before Jasper died. We'll use it for something else." Rona's hand tightened around her notes. Blair moved toward the front. "Macbeth." Hamish turned his head slightly. "Let me finish." His voice was quiet. Blair stopped. Hamish faced the room. "Jasper Lorne died because he discovered the rare bird claim was false." A murmur moved through the chairs. Eyelid looked down. Hamish continued. "The Curlew call was real, but it didn't come from that field. It came from an old recording." Eyelid placed a speaker beneath a stone by the Reedbed path, so the sound would seem to rise from the grazing boundary. Someone near the front whispered, "I knew it." Mrs. Patel looked toward the voice. "No, you did not." The whispering stopped. Hamish looked at Eyelid. She wanted to delay the holiday cabins until a proper survey could be done. She lied for a place she loved and told herself it was temporary. Eyelid did not defend herself. Angus watched her from the back of the room. There was anger in his face, but no triumph. Blair said, "Then she had every reason to kill Lorne." "No." Hamish placed the grey field recorder on the front table. The recording ended at 11:42. Eyelid removed the speaker and returned to the hall. Jasper was alive afterward. He wrote notes about the donor promises and the trust application after the sound had stopped. He laid down a copy of Jasper's notebook page. Someone else went to the hide. Rona's expression remained composed. Hamish took out the torn green rubber fragment. On the first morning, Jasper borrowed the club binoculars with the split green eye cup. They left a crescent mark on his cheek. He placed a photograph of the hide window beside the rubber. The same shape was found on the inside glass of the side window. Blair leaned forward despite himself. Hamish pointed to the photograph. "That window looks toward the speaker side." Jasper's own binoculars were arranged at the front slit, facing the loch. The scene was staged to suggest he had been alone watching for the bird. He turned toward Angus. "Angus's binoculars have black eye cups. His boots carried dark hill mud. The hide floor held fine reed-bed silt. He was loud enough to make a useful suspect, but the details refused him." Angus gave Blair a hard look. Blair pretended not to notice. Hamish opened the Bird Club equipment book. The green binoculars were signed out under Eyelid's name. Rona spoke for the first time. "Which proves she used them." "It proves someone wrote her name." He placed the equipment entry beside Rona's trust signature. "The handwriting is yours." Several heads turned. Rona's mouth tightened. "I signed equipment out for volunteers. Everyone knows that." "Aye. It made borrowing easier." Hamish paused. "And blaming easier." Rona laughed once. "This is speculation." "No." Speculation was the rare bird. Her face changed. "Only slightly, but the room felt it." Hamish continued. Jasper discovered more than Eyelid's recording. He found that donors had already been promised a confirmed reserve. The success story had been sold before the evidence existed. Rona said, "The field deserved protection." "Perhaps." "It does. That is now the same as saying every act done for it was right." Rona looked around the hall, as though appealing to people she had organized for years. "You all know what the cabins would have done. Traffic, drainage, noise. The field would have been lost." No one answered. She turned back to Hamish. Jasper wanted a scandal. He did not care what happened here. "He cared about his column," said Hamish. "You cared about the trust. Eyelid cared about the field. Everybody had something noble to say." His voice softened. "But Jasper was still alive when you followed him to the hide." Rona's breathing changed. "You borrowed the binoculars under Eyelid's name. You approached from behind, where Callum saw a woman kneeling near the supports. You wanted Jasper to delay the article." "I never." "He told you that grief had become paperwork." Eyelid looked up sharply. Rona stared at Hamish. Callum's words had reached their mark. "You argued," Hamish said. In the cramped hide, Jasper mocked the trust and threatened to publish the donor letters. "You pushed him, or grabbed him, and let anger do the rest." He struck the bench corner. Rona's face had gone pale. "It was not meant—" The words escaped before she could stop them. Blair straightened. Hamish did not move. "Afterward, you arranged his binoculars at the front window, but you looked through the green pair toward the speaker site to make sure Eyelid had removed it." The split eye cup pressed against the side glass. He held up the torn rubber. "The loose piece came off on the Reedbed path. Sonsie found it." Blair muttered. "That cat again?" Mrs. Patel said. "He has better timing." Rona sank into a chair. "I only wanted him to wait." Her voice had lost its public smoothness. "He said he would publish before the survey. He called us frauds. He said donors would demand their money back and that Eyelid would become a joke." Eyelid whispered. "So you used my name?" Rona looked at her. "I was trying to protect you." "No," said Eyelid. You were trying to make it look like me. Rona flinched. The accusation landed more heavily than Blair's approaching footsteps. He fell, Rona said. I pushed his arm away. He struck the bench. I thought. You thought of the application, said Hamish. She closed her eyes. For one moment, yes. Blair nodded to McNab. This time, Hamish did not stop him. As McNab approached, Rona looked around the hall at the banners, the catalogues, and the people who had once admired her efficiency. The field still needs saving. Hamish answered gently. Then it will need saving with the truth. McNab led her toward the door. Nobody spoke until it closed. Then Mrs. Patel began pouring tea. It was not avoidance. Some rituals were simply how a village remained in the room after certainty had left it. Chapter 11. A field without applause. The rare bird weekend ended without a closing ceremony. Nobody seemed eager to stand beneath the conservation banner, and Rona's careful programme had become evidence. By Monday morning, the folding chairs were stacked in the hall cupboard, and the remaining seed catalogues had been left beside the door for anyone too embarrassed to admit wanting one. The newspapers stayed for 2 days. They photographed the bird hide, the disputed field, and Angus McCrae leaning over a gate. One reporter asked him to look angry. I am angry, Angus said. Could you look more toward the cabins? There are no cabins. That is the difficulty. Angus shut the gate in his face. Blair gave a statement outside the police station. He described the investigation as a coordinated Strathbane operation and referred twice to a rare curlew called a curly. Hamish stood behind him and said nothing. When Blair had finished, a reporter asked whether Constable Macbeth had identified the crucial binocular clue. Blair glanced over his shoulder. Macbeth assisted. Aye, said Hamish. Mostly by being there. Blair's smile survived until the cameras turned away. You enjoy making me look foolish. I've never thought you needed help. You're still one complaint away from transfer. To the traffic lights? Blair walked to his car without answering. The conservation application was suspended. The proposed cabin lease was suspended as well, though for less generous reasons. The landowner had no wish to appear in photographs beside the words fraud, murder, and luxury development. A proper ecological survey was commissioned. For the first time, the field would be examined without anyone knowing in advance what the survey ought to find. Eyelid did not leave her cottage for 2 days. On the third morning, Mrs. Patel placed a basket outside her door containing bread, soup, and a note that read, The jar must be returned. It was not forgiveness, but it required Eyelid to imagine a future visit to the shop. Angus repaired the loose hinge on her gate that afternoon. He did not knock. Eyelid saw him through the kitchen window and came outside while he was tightening the last screw. You need not do that, she said. It was hanging. It has hung for months. Ah, yeah. He tested the gate. It swung cleanly. Eyelid folded her arms against the wind. I lied about the field. I know. You were right. I know that too. She looked toward the grazing slope. I did not do it to stop you lambing. You didn't ask whether it would. No. Angus put the screwdriver into his coat pocket. I didn't ask why you were frightened of losing it. They stood with the gate between them. Eyelid said, The Curlew recording was my father's. I guessed. He made it on the North Ridge. A better place for curlews. He would have hated what I did. Probably. She looked at him. Angus added, Then he would have made tea. Her mouth trembled into the beginning of a smile. I'm sorry. It was not a grand reconciliation. Grand reconciliations rarely survived the next practical disagreement. But Angus left the gate working, and Eyelid did not close it until he had crossed the road. Callum Fraser returned to school and acquired a brief, uncomfortable fame. Several adults praised him for telling the truth after spending days making it difficult for him to do so. Mrs. Patel gave him a free oatcake and warned him not to develop heroic habits without consulting his mother. The village was slower with Myrie. People understood why she had tried to protect Eyelid. They also understood that her silence might have sent Angus to prison. For a while, conversations paused when she entered the shop. Then, one wet afternoon, Mrs. Wellington asked her to reach a jar from the top shelf. It was a small request, but Lochdubh often returned people to ordinary life through errands. Hamish visited Islid at the end of the week. She had placed her father's notebooks back on the shelves. The empty pile on the kitchen table had disappeared. "What will happen to Rona?" she asked. "That's for the Procurator Fiscal. She will say it was an accident. It may have begun as one, but afterward?" Hamish looked at the blue teapot between them. Afterward was a choice. Islid traced a crack in the glaze. "I keep thinking that if I had told the truth after Jasper questioned the recording, none of it would have happened. Maybe. You could say something kinder. I could. But you wouldn't believe it." She looked toward the window. "Do people hate me? Some are enjoying disappointment. It makes them feel perceptive. And the others? They're waiting to see how you behave next. That sounds worse. It lasts longer, but it is fairer." She nodded. Hamish rose. "At the door," Islid said, "there may still be birds worth protecting there. I expect there are. Not rare ones. Common things need somewhere to live too." Outside, the day had cleared after rain. Hamish walked down toward the grazing field, with lugs following until the road began to rise. The dog stopped, considered the distance, and returned to the police station, where public duty remained nearer to his bowl. The new hide had been locked while the investigation continued. Without visitors, the Reedbed path seemed narrower and more honest. No signs directed attention. No recorded call rose from beneath the flat stone. Sonsie appeared briefly on the wall, watched Hamish pass, and slipped into the reeds. At the boundary fence, Angus was moving sheep into the lower field. Islid stood by the gate, holding it open. They were not speaking, but neither was pretending the other did not exist. Hamish continued toward the loch. No curlew called. There was only wind through the grass, the dull complaint of a sheep and a rook making an ugly practical noise from a fence post. The rook did not require an audience. It did not prove anything. It called because it was there. Hamish stood listening until the cold began to work through his jacket. Then he turned back toward Lochdubh, where kettles were boiling, stories were being corrected, and the village had already found 3 new matters on which to be confidently mistaken. Lochdubh did not become less fond of nature after the truth emerged. It became, for a little while, more cautious about wearing goodness like a badge. The split green eye cup had been made to help someone see clearly. Instead, it marked a place where nearly everyone saw what suited them. A rare bird, a noble campaign, an easy suspect, or a scandal worth printing. Islid's first lie had grown from love and fear. Rona's choices grew from pride and the terror of public failure. Neither beginning made the ending harmless. A good cause cannot make every act committed in its name good. Sometimes the most dangerous lies begin by saying they are only protecting something until the truth can catch up. The field dried. The kettles boiled. Angus's sheep returned to grazing, and the real birds came or did not come without consulting a committee. Lugs kept to warm doorways. Sonsie kept his own counsel. And Lochdubh returned to being kind, vain, suspicious, and capable of repair. Have you ever seen people become so certain they were doing good that they stopped checking whether they were telling the truth? Thank you for returning to Lochdubh with us tonight. And when the obvious suspect is too loud to be guilty, Hamish listens for what the village wanted to hear.